Dungeons 4, Calypso Media's latest installment in the Dungeons franchise has finally arrived, and with it, comes with its own brand of humor and strategy. Now, if you haven't seen nor played any of the titles from the franchise yet, Dungeons 4 is essentially an RTS game that mixes in the comical and goofy interactions within its campaign as it gets narrated. Its design spawns a cartoony, yet oddly satisfying look, while its strategy and dungeon mechanics is both engaging and fun. But despite all that, Dungeons 4 is a game that's a bit hard to express in a few words, so let me give you a little tour of the dungeon, shall we? Right off the bat, you can choose between 3 options, such as starting a new skirmish, engaging in 2-player co-op, or playing the game's main campaign, which is where the game takes what would normally be a snooze-fest of dungeon crawling and strategy into something a bit more fun and unique. Here, you take control of the Dark Elf Thalia and her forces of evil, as they rain their sort of evilness on the not-so-evil overworld dwellers, or so that story goes. It's a lengthy campaign, but made fun by its hilarious and charming narration by Kevin Brighting that gets you started out with progressively engaging encounters, while teaching you the ins and outs of the game's main gameplay loop. From here, you get to unleash your peons, or in this case, little snots, that would do your every bidding, such as digging out the underworld to carve out the dungeon of your dreams, or construct rooms and structures that you'll be able to use before your army can march into the overworld, to defeat the heroes getting in your way of setting their encampments on a fiery blaze of hell. It's a pretty straightforward engagement, where you start off by digging out the underworld to make space for structures like treasure rooms, for your snots to mine and store gold, aside from other resources that also needs their own specific rooms for storage. The world is also filled with all sorts of hidden stuffs, from areas with enemies like monsters and dwarven encampments, to unique areas that has a handful of resources to gather. These resources are also what you'd need for most of your adventuring needs. Gold is like the main resource needed for your basic needs, like construction and hiring units for your army of evil, while things like evilness shards are spent for other stuffs, like upgrading structures and research. Mapping out the area, creating pathways for your units, and building traps along the way is what makes Dungeons 4 unique compared to its rivals. You're not just given a huge open area to explore unlike most RTS games in the market. Here, you will literally carve out the underworld to make paths that would lead to all sorts of things, from rooms filled with treasures and resources, or to a gathering of enemies just waiting to be slaughtered. This is especially interesting, as the world is even larger than ever, with up to 4 times larger maps, and twice as much creatures, like overworld bosses and dungeon creeps. Game progression is also fairly satisfying. While at times it feels slow, it's just enough without being overwhelming. It still takes the time to spread humor, while not detracting you from its story and your overall goal. You even gain access to 3 distinct factions here, namely, the Horde, the Demons and the Undead, each with their own little intricacies. The Horde, for example, has their champion units that gets unlocked by research and after a certain units level is reached. Meanwhile, the demons can be resurrected, while the undead are simply just undead, and will sleep off their injuries in the graveyard, while also being able to summon their own minions. Thalia also comes with her own perk system now, which provides a lot more fun and humor to the mix, because who wouldn't want their undead minions explode upon death as a perk, right? You also have access to game-changing spells that will help with your goal of spreading chaos and evil upon the world. There's a handful of them, like portals that will help you reach areas that would otherwise be unreachable, or damaging spells to be rid of pesky catapults and other dangerous threats. There's a cartoony feel of goofy proportions when it comes to its overall design. It's one that really fits the kind of humor the game is trying to achieve, without being too absurd that it would detract from what it's trying to do. I even love how Thalia, a dark elf and the absolute evil general of your army, can be outfitted with a sailor-themed getup. As I've said previously, the world is vast. With 4 times larger maps, There's a lot more to look forward to when it comes to the game's overall progression, and at the same time, exploration and strategy scales off well as you find more heroes to slaughter, more villages to pillage, and just more chaos to spread across the land. This is even more emphasized as the world transforms into a fiery pit of hell, for each major point in the game's world is captured. Dungeons 4 is an absurd game, but in a very good way. Its goofy nature and humorous narration complete the package for me more than the actual progression and RTS gameplay though. But don't get me wrong, those things are actually good, and honestly, they are engaging enough that even without its silliness and fourth wall breaking antics, I would still have fun getting slogged down on each of its campaign scenarios. There's a lot of merits to be said here with how the game can be a pretty solid RTS that packs quite a bit of punch. It delves into a dungeon master sort of progression on one end, while creating an army that synergizes well to topple even the strongest of heroes on the other. It's that kind of mix where I find the most fun outside of its goofy narration and storytelling, which makes the game a worthy hell I would love to visit. And for everything else gaming, choose Envision.
A community built by gamers